Where does your data actually go? A manager pastes a confidential document into a chatbot, types "summarize this for me," and moves on. But the original just went somewhere. This is the story of where it went, and how to decide what should ever leave the building. Let me start with a small, ordinary moment. It happens hundreds of times a day inside companies right now, and almost nobody thinks twice about it. A manager has a document. Maybe it is a contract. Maybe it is a list of customers, or the numbers for next quarter, or a legal memo that a lawyer marked privileged and confidential. And the manager is busy, so they do the natural thing. They open an AI chatbot, they paste the whole document in, and they type, "Summarize this for me." A few seconds later, a clean, tidy summary appears. Wonderful, job done. They close the tab and move on. Now I want to ask the question that this entire episode is built around. A simple one. Where did that document just go? Not the summary, the document. The original, confidential thing they pasted in. When they hit enter, where did those words physically travel? Whose computer did they land on? Who is allowed to keep them? For how long? Under whose laws? And could anyone else ever see them? Here is what I have found. If you ask a room of smart, capable executives that question, almost no one can answer it. They approved the tool. They may have even signed a contract for it. But they genuinely do not know where their own words went. And that is not because they are careless, it is because nobody ever explained the machine to them in plain language. So that is what we are going to do today. We are going to build the whole thing up from zero, no jargon left behind. And by the end, you will be able to answer that question in your sleep. And, more importantly, decide which documents should ever be pasted in the first place. Because you cannot protect what leaves the building if you do not know it left. Almost everything confusing about AI clears up the moment you understand what the model physically is. So let us be very literal. An AI model, the thing behind ChatGPT, behind Copilot, behind all of it, is not a mind. It is not a database. It is not a search engine reaching out across the internet. An AI model is one gigantic file full of numbers. That is genuinely it. Picture a single, colossal spreadsheet. Billions of cells, and each cell just holds a number. Those numbers have a name, they are called the model's weights. When an engineer says the model, they mean that file. Nothing inside it is a document you could open and read. It is just numbers that, when you push a question through them with a big calculation, happen to produce sensible-sounding language out the other side. So where did those numbers come from? They came from something called training, and this is the heavy lifting that happens up front, long before you ever touch the thing. Imagine a person who read an enormous slice of the internet, books, articles, forums, code, not to memorize any of it, but to soak up the pattern of how words follow other words. If I say, the capital of France is, your mind fills in Paris before I finish. You did not look it up. You just know the shape of it. The model built that same instinct across a staggering amount of human writing, and then it froze that instinct into those billions of numbers. Here is the part managers most often get wrong. The text it trained on is not filed away inside the model as documents you could pull back out. The model did not keep the library. It kept the reading habit. There is one honest caveat. A model can occasionally spit back a snippet it effectively memorized because it saw the exact same thing many times, and that matters for copyright and privacy. But that is the rare exception, not how the thing normally works. This is also, by the way, exactly why AI can be so confidently wrong and invent things out of thin air. Most of the time, it is reconstructing a plausible next word from patterns, not looking up a fact in a cabinet. Now, using the model is a completely separate act, and it has its own name, inference. Do not let the word scare you. Inference just means run the numbers to get an answer. When you type a prompt, your words get turned into numbers. Those numbers get pushed through that giant file of weights, on whatever computer the model actually lives on. That computer does the arithmetic, billions of calculations, and out pops one likely next word. Then the next, until you have got a full reply. Then the reply travels back to your screen. Notice what just had to happen in the middle. The computing did not happen on your phone by magic. It happened wherever the model physically sits. And that is the one idea I need you to carry into every AI decision you ever make. To get an answer, your prompt, which is your data, has to physically travel to, and be processed on, the machine where the model lives. There are only 3 places that machine can be. 1. Your own laptop, if the model is small enough to run there, in which case, nothing leaves the building. 2. Your company's own server, under your control. 3. And this is what ChatGPT and Copilot almost always mean. A data center operated by a big cloud provider, hosting the services of the AI companies. Here is a detail that surprises people. Even the AI labs do not own most of the buildings their models run in. They rent that capacity from the big cloud providers. So let us kill a phrase right now. The cloud is not some fluffy thing floating overhead. The cloud is literally someone else's computer in someone else's building that you are renting time on. Which gives us the on-a-line intuition to carry into the rest of this episode. Using cloud AI is like sending your document to an outside office, to have it processed and a summary mailed back. The summary comes back, sure. But your document physically went there. It sat on their systems, under their terms, not yours. If that document is a customer list, or a contract, or your source code, then the question, where does the model run, and under what terms, stops being a nerdy technical detail, and becomes the single most important data governance decision you will make. Same AI, same convenience. On your laptop, the data never leaves the house. In the cloud, it always does. Everything else hangs on that one fork. All right. Your data left the building and went to a provider. Now let us follow it, because here is the single most important thing I can tell a manager. With cloud AI, the tier you use matters more than the brand you trust. Let me say that again, because it is counterintuitive. The exact same company will train on your words in one product and be contractually forbidden from touching them in another. So the question, is it safe to use this provider, is actually the wrong question. The right question is, which door did the employee walk through? Picture 2 doors into every AI provider. The consumer door, the free apps, and the personal subscriptions people sign up for with their own email, is where your data is, by default, fuel. The enterprise door, the paid business and API tiers your company buys, is where your data is, by contract, off limits. Through the consumer door, free and personal chatbots train on your conversations by default. To turn that off, you have to dig into settings and flip a switch, and even then it only applies to future conversations. Some providers' own terms literally warn you not to paste confidential information there, because human reviewers may read and annotate it. One major provider changed its consumer terms in 2025, so personal accounts now train on your chats unless you opt out, and if you allow it, they can keep that data for up to 5 years. So sit with what that means. An employee using a personal AI account on their phone is, quietly, and with the best of intentions, feeding your corporate secrets into a training set. Now the enterprise door, and I want to be genuinely fair here, because these enterprise offerings are strong and worth paying for. The business and API tiers do not train on your data by default. Abuse logs are held for around 30 days, then deleted, and qualifying customers can get what is called zero data retention, meaning your prompts are not stored at all after the request finishes. The major paid cloud AI services do not use your prompts to train the foundation models. These are real contractual protections. But here are the 4 traps managers fall into, and every one of them has bitten a real company. Trap 1. Consumer versus enterprise confusion. Leadership hears, "We do not train on business data," and relaxes, not realizing that promise evaporates the second someone logs in with a personal account. Trap 2. Shadow AI. This is the real leak. It is not a hacker. It is a well-meaning employee pasting a contract or a patient record into a personal chatbot on their phone, completely outside any agreement your company signed. The enterprise contract you are so proud of never even touched that conversation. Trap 3, and write this one down, a policy is not a guarantee. Deleted in 30 days is a promise the provider makes and controls, and a court can override it. This is not hypothetical. In a major newspaper's lawsuit against an AI provider, a judge ordered the provider to preserve consumer chat logs that would otherwise have been deleted. Later, a court affirmed a separate order requiring the provider to hand over a sample of 20 million de-identified consumer chat logs to the other side's lawyers under a legal protective order. The enterprise and zero data retention customers were carved out and protected. Ordinary consumer and personal paid users were not. Trap 4. Professors and geography. The model answering you inside one company's product might actually be built by a different company. Some providers have stated that certain I-modal interactions fall outside their regional data burial commitments and are processed largely in another country. So who physically handles your data and in which country depends on a chain of subcontractors most managers have never even seen. The governance takeaway is blunt. Buy the enterprise tier, turn on zero data retention where it is offered, block personal AI accounts from touching company data, and actually read the processor list. Because the strongest privacy promise in the cloud is still a revocable policy, not a law of physics. And that brings us to the most dangerous sentence in enterprise AI. It is the sentence that lets everyone stop worrying. It goes like this: "It is fine, we signed an agreement with them." I want to be careful here, because a good enterprise agreement is genuinely valuable. It is not nothing. It legally binds the provider not to train on your data, to keep retention short or zero, maybe even to keep your data in your region. Real protections, worth paying for. I am not here to tell you contracts are worthless. I am here to tell you what a contract actually is, and what it can and cannot reach. A contract is a promise between you and the specific company you signed with. It governs their behavior. And that is exactly where its power ends. Because think about the layers stacked on top of your data once it is sitting in their data center. Your contract binds the provider. It does not bind the provider's government. It does not bind a court that issues a subpoena. It cannot unhappen a data breach. And it cannot fix a misconfiguration, an engineer leaving a storage bucket open, a permission set wrong, because a promise to be careful is not the same as being invulnerable. Here is the thing about the comfortable lie: it treats the contract as a wall. It is not a wall. It is a promise. And a promise only constrains the party who made it, not the government that party lives under, not the attacker who breaks in, not the employee who goes rogue, and not the honest mistake that exposes the whole thing. A contract tells you how the provider intends to behave. It says nothing about everyone else who might reach your data once it is in their hands. So let us look those everyone else's in the eye. And I want to frame this carefully, because this chapter is where fearmongering usually takes over, and I refuse to do that to you. I am not going to tell you your data is being stolen. I am going to tell you what exposure exists, the difference between certain and possible, and let you weigh it like the adult decision-maker you are. First and most concretely, lawful access. There are laws under which a provider can be legally compelled, through court process, to hand over data it controls. And here is the part that trips people up. Jurisdiction tends to follow the provider's corporate ownership, not the physical location of the server. So storing your data on a server in another country does not automatically place it beyond the reach of the laws that govern its parent company. These authorities are not static. The exact wording shifts with each political deadline, but the lawful access framework has persisted for years. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is written law, debated in the open. And we are not guessing about whether such access can happen, because public disclosures years ago proved the mechanism is real, that governments can and do compel large technology providers to turn over user data. It does not mean anyone is reading your quarterly numbers tonight. It means the mechanism exists whenever a third party holds your data. Second, jurisdiction and cross-border rules. If you operate in Europe, this is your daily reality. Moving personal data across borders has long been sensitive, precisely because of those lawful access laws. Europe's top court has more than once treated foreign lawful access as a real problem for European data. That is not editorializing, that is case law. Third, breaches and insiders. Every company that holds data can be hacked, no matter how good, no exceptions. And every company has employees, and employees are human. The exposure is not malice, it is arithmetic. The more parties who hold a copy of your data, the more doors exist that could, someday, be forced or left ajar. And fourth, the one managers underrate most, the corporate intelligence angle. Forget any single leaked document for a second. Think about the aggregate. If your whole leadership team is pasting prompts into an outside AI all day, help me model this acquisition, draft the layoff communication, analyze this competitor's pricing, then your prompts, taken together, are a live readout of your company's strategy. Not one secret. Your thinking. Where all of it goes, and who could ever assemble it, is worth a long, sober pause. And fifth, a different animal entirely, because it is not about who can see your data, but whether your tool will even be there tomorrow. The model can be taken away. A cloud model is not yours, it is a service, and services can be switched off. Just weeks before I recorded this, a government issued a national security directive that abruptly cut off access to two of the most capable models for users outside the country, essentially overnight. It was walked back within days, once the concern behind it was resolved. But sit with what it proved. A model that companies around the world had built real work on top of was available one morning and gone by the afternoon, by government order, and not one of those customers had any say in it. One financial paper called it plainly, a kill switch. And a kill switch does not only get flipped by governments, a provider can retire the exact model version your process depends on, change its price overnight, cut off your region, or simply go out of business. When you build on a cloud model, you are renting a capability that someone else can revoke without asking you. When you download an open-weight model, you hold a file, and no government directive and no provider decision can reach across the internet and delete the copy sitting on a server you own. Let me be scrupulously fair. One more time, none of this means the major cloud providers are rifling through your files. The reputable ones work hard on security, and routine snooping is not the threat. The point is narrower, and far more durable. This entire category of risk, subpoena, breach, insider, lawful access only exists because a third party is holding your data. Remove the third party, and you remove the category. Here is the mental model I want to leave you with, and it is just 5 words. With cloud AI, you are trusting. Not you are exposed, not you are doomed, you are trusting. You are trusting the provider to honor the contract. You are trusting them not to get breached. You are trusting their government not to come knocking, their employees not to slip, their engineers not to misconfigure a server. Every one of those is probably a reasonable bet with a serious provider. But every one of them is a bet, a place where you have handed over control and are trusting someone else to hold it well. And once you see it that way, the solution becomes almost embarrassingly simple. There is exactly one way to not have to trust anybody with your data. Do not send it out, that is it. That is the whole secret. You cannot be betrayed by a party who never held your data. You cannot be subpoenaed for a document that never left your building. The only bulletproof way to remove the risk of your data being somewhere it should not be is for it to never go there in the first place. So the real question was never, which provider do I trust most? The real question is, for this particular piece of data, am I willing to trust at all? Or should it simply never leave the house? Which means we finally need to talk about the option most managers do not even know they have. For years, there was a good excuse for sending everything to the cloud. The only genuinely capable AI models lived behind cloud APIs. Full stop. That excuse is gone. Today, there is a whole family of what are called open-weight models that you can download and run on your own hardware, usually with no licensing fee. As I record this, the strongest of them come mostly out of China, models like GLM and Kimi, alongside DeepSeek and Alibaba's Qwen, and the leaderboard reshuffles every few months. The exact names will have changed by the time you watch this. What will not change is the trend. These open models have been closing the gap with the big cloud systems remarkably fast, and the best of them now trade blows with the frontier on real work. Remember Chapter 2, a model is just a giant file of numbers. Well, These are giant files of numbers that the makers let you have. You put the file on a computer you own, and it runs entirely on your side of the fence. And here is a reassurance that matters for this episode especially. It does not really matter who trained these weights, because you are running the file on your own machine. A downloaded model has no way to phone home unless you connect it to the internet, and the whole point is that you do not. Once the numbers are sitting on a server you control, where they came from stops being a privacy question. One honest caveat so nobody's surprised later: open weight is not the same as open source. Most of these licenses allow free commercial use, but a few add conditions, so have your legal team glance at the license, rather than assume free means no strings. Here is the analogy I would offer. Cloud AI is like renting a car with the hood welded shut and a meter running the whole time. An open weight model is like buying the engine and dropping it into a car you own. You have to maintain it, but it is yours, and it runs on your property. Now the fair question: are these open models as smart as the very biggest frontier systems in the cloud? On the very hardest, most cutting-edge reasoning, a top cloud model may still hold a slight edge, though even that gap keeps shrinking. But that is the wrong question for a manager. The right question is, are they good enough for the actual work my company does every day? And there the answer is a clear yes. Summarizing long documents, drafting emails and reports, translating, answering where in our policies does it say something, giving developers coding help. Open models handle all of that well. And the gap has been closing fast. So what does running it locally actually buy you? One word worth putting on the wall: sovereignty. Your data stays inside a boundary you chose. There is no third party who could be subpoenaed, breached, or served a lawful access request for your information, because they never had it. And that independence covers the model itself, because it is a file you downloaded and own. No one can price you out of it, retire it, region block it, or switch it off. Remember the kill switch: cloud tools can be revoked overnight, a file on your own server cannot. It also makes your compliance conversations dramatically simpler. Keeping data in-house takes the cross-border transfer question and the third-party processor question. Two of the hardest parts of privacy regulation, right off the table. It does not make you automatically compliant, you still own your own safeguards. But it removes whole categories of risk instead of just managing them. And I owe you the honest trade-offs, because anyone who skips these is selling you something. There are three. 1. Capability. On the very hardest, most cutting-edge tasks, a top cloud model will still beat your local one. 2. Cost and effort up front. You buy hardware, a server with good graphics cards, and you need someone in IT who can set it up and keep it running. It is not zero maintenance, and it is not free to run, there is power and upkeep. 3. The subtle one. The security burden moves on to you. In the cloud, the provider guards the walls. On premises, that is your job now. But notice, for exactly the sensitive data we have been talking about, taking that responsibility in-house is usually the entire point, not a downside. So how does a manager actually decide? Please do not think a Lorno thing. Think of a simple 4-bucket sort of your data: public, internal, confidential, regulated. Public and internal: marketing copy, brainstorming, general research, low-risk stuff. Go ahead and use the cloud. Enjoy the convenience and the extra horsepower. Confidential and regulated: customer records, financials, health data, legal matters, anything under a compliance regime. Keep those on your local models, where they never leave. This hybrid approach is not a compromise or a beginner's move. It is the mature answer serious organizations land on. Right tool, right data, sorted by sensitivity. And here is the concrete first step, small enough to actually do this quarter. Stand up one private server running a good open model. Put a simple internal chat interface in front of it, so it feels exactly like the chatbot everyone already knows. Then connect it to your own company documents, so it can answer questions, grounded in your handbooks and policies. That last piece is a technique called RAG, where the model looks things up in your documents before it answers, so it grounds its response in your reality instead of guessing. Configure it with no external internet access, reachable only from inside your corporate network. Now your people have a genuinely helpful AI assistant that actually knows your business. And, as long as that no-gress boundary holds, not one word of what they type ever leaves the building. Start there. Prove the value on real work. Expand from what you learn. Sovereignty is not a slogan. It is just the decision to keep the engine on your own property. So let us come back to that manager at the very beginning, pasting a confidential document into a chatbot to just summarize it. Where did that document go? Now you can answer. It got turned into numbers and sent to a machine in someone else's building, a cloud provider's data center, where it was processed under whatever terms your company did, or did not, negotiate. Maybe it was protected by a strong enterprise contract. Maybe it went through a personal account and quietly became training fuel. Either way, it left. And once it left, its safety rested on trust in a company, and in everyone who stands behind that company, their government, their courts, their employees, their security. I do not want to leave you paranoid. That is not the lesson. The big cloud providers are not villains, and cloud AI is genuinely the right choice for most everyday work. Paranoia would have you unplug everything, and that would be foolish. The lesson is the opposite of paranoia. It is deliberateness. You do not have to be afraid of AI. You have to be deliberate about it. You have to know the one fork that everything hangs on, data that leaves the building versus data that stays, and you have to decide, on purpose, which of your information is allowed to walk out the door and which never should. Public and internal, send it to the cloud, enjoy the power. Confidential and regulated, keep it home, where no contract, no subpoena, and no breach can reach it, because it was never there to reach. That is the whole job, not fear, not blind trust. Just a clear-read decision, made on purpose, about what leaves the building. You do not have to be paranoid. You have to be deliberate. Decide what leaves the building, before someone decides it for you. If this helped you finally see where your data actually goes, subscribe and pass it to the manager who needs it. This has been Code Zen.